my pleasure to welcome you to this episode of the Mantle Intergenerational Dialogue Forum on Transformative Leadership. I am honored to introduce a man who is a distinguished lawyer in his own right, an intellectual, and a reform activist who has served Kenya, the Africa region, and the world in different leadership capacities, including as Kenya's Chief Justice and a President of the Judiciary, and thereafter as the Commonwealth Secretary General's Special Envoy to the Maldives. He is also credited, especially in the human rights circles, as the best example of consistency and walking the talk on matters of transformative leadership. I'm excited indeed to welcome the former Chief Justice of the Republic of Kenya, Senior Counsel Dr. Willy Mutunga. My other guest is an advocate of the High Court of Kenya, the managing partner of her law firm that was founded in 2012 and specializes in commercial law. She is a certified mediator in many areas such as tax, commercial, family, and divorce mediation. She is an alternative dispute resolution expert and the chairperson of the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators. She is also a member of the Dispute Resolution Board Foundation and is also a government expert and accredited governance auditor. She is the only Kenyan woman approved by FIFA as a sports mediator. I would now like to extend a very warm welcome to Ms. Jacqueline Waihenya. And I am Maria Nzomo, your host. I want to start with you, CJ. Start with your core beliefs and principles that define who you are and your views on a transformative leadership.
I always start by talking about the planet. Okay, because in Kenya we tend to be very insular and we talk about Kenya as if it's an island, but it's not. Because it's very, very, very important to understand what kind of planet we have, because it's the one that will shape our positions, political and ideological. And my view of the planet now is a planet that is not free, is a planet that it's not peaceful, it's a planet that is racist, is a planet that is sexist, is a planet that is homophobic, it's a planet that reflects gross inequality. And that's where I start, and from then I come to Kenya. And in Kenya I always I tell the Kenyans two stories. The one story is, and people might have heard it, so I will repeat it because I think it's important. There's this guy in Uganda who formed a political party, and the objective of it was, according to him, that he wanted to bring the British back. To sort out Uganda. He thought it was a noble idea, and he formed his party, and he participated in the election, and he got only 2 votes. So he went to his wife and said, "This idea is noble. Why did I just get 2 votes?" And his wife told him that you must be very stupid because the British never left. So that's one. The other one is Mexico, where the president calls a meeting and a televised meeting to talk to his country people, and he said it's good news and bad news. The good news is all our debts are being forgiven. But the bad news is that we have that 6 hours to leave Mexico. We don't own it. And I think it is something that Ngugi wa Thiong'o has captured, on an article where he prophesies that Mau Mau is coming back. Okay. So when it comes to Kenya, we hardly discuss this in terms of leadership, who rules. Because there are people we vote for, but they are not our rulers. They are agents of national and international interests that are very, very, very powerful and that are in the background. And unless people understand that situation, particularly the young people, it's very difficult then to talk about transformative leadership. But in the case of Kenya, in our constitution, we dealt with that issue. The politics of division that we have in this country is decreed against by the constitution itself. When you look at Article 91, that you cannot have a party based on ethnicity, on religion or region. You can't have parties that have militia. You can't have parties that don't even practice democracy. Because in terms of the constitution, all our parties are unconstitutional. If you ask them to show you the list of members or accounts, whether they are filed accounts and so forth, they don't do that. So the Constitution, if we breathe life into Chapter 6, for example, the country will change. Okay, so for us, we are lucky. We have a Constitution that, if implemented, we could be, on our way to, develop, having a transformative Constitution. And we have examples of certain leaders, whether it's Kibwana in Makueni, Anyang' Nyong'o, where you can actually see people who are committed to fighting corruption, to making sure there is public participation, and corruption is not, tolerated and so forth. But you need a leadership that can do it. And in our case, the mistake we made and we continue to make, okay, is that the Constitution is like a beautiful baby that we gave birth to in 2010, but we gave it to the dares to bring up. You know who the dares are? The child traffickers. It doesn't work that way. And that's the crux of our problem, that to implement the Constitution and that to get social transformation in this country, the youth have to consider the kind of leadership that focuses on health, okay, employment, the material interests, of young people, and that is not happening because education is commodified, so is healthcare, and so forth.
And talking of the youth themselves, we have some very young people now in leadership, in parliament and other positions. These are the people you're saying they need to come on board. Are their values really different from their older, their fathers and mothers?
No.
So where are we going to draw this leadership for?
They must be leaders who shun corruption, who shun politics of ethnicity, leaders who male chauvinists, and they have values actually that are in the Constitution itself. That's what I was saying. They have to be different from what we have at the moment. Because if they are not different, there wouldn't be any changes. When the youth says that our generation has let us down, it's because they are short of history also. Because when you look at the history of resistance, there are people who have been at that struggle, but historians don't write about the resistance, the kind of struggles that we waged in the university for academic freedom, for example, for our students and staff, the cooperatives, the unions, and so forth. And even they reformed the mass actions in the 1990s and so forth. Get the backing of Kenyans about these issues. To basically show that if you want free education from primary to university, you've got to challenge IMF and World Bank and neoliberalism, isn't it? Because that's where it comes from. If you want universal health care, it's the same, it's the same thing. If you want to end corruption, yes, resources will be there to do stuff and so forth. So that is the leadership, and I see it on the horizon, because I see a lot of young people who realize that this thing of thinking that as Luos, our savior is so, as Kambas, a savior, particularly the big five, not the animals, those particular communities have to have people who see the young people. Yes, they've got to see, to reflect the vision of the Constitution, which says there is diversity, ethnic and religious, but we committed to building a united sovereign nation.
Jackie, what is your take?
I think since independence, since we had everybody fighting for, the right to be able to organize ourselves, create our own governments, and rule ourselves, has always been heavily weighed towards the political side. Even the second liberation was also very heavy on the political side, civil rights and political rights. But we have always shelved and put to the side the economic, social, and cultural rights. Yes, they're there in the Constitution, but when it comes to the realization of those rights, I think there's somebody who said it very well. Hapa kwa ground ni different. We have all the policy reforms, we have all these great ideas, we have all the statutes. But when it comes to implementing them, we find that there is a lackluster approach to realizing these rights. And, unfortunately, the economic, social, and cultural rights are the bedrock for sustainable development. So if we gallop with the political rights and we leave the economic and social rights behind, then there is always going to be a huge population which is going to be disenfranchised. Those that I have mentioned, the women, the youth. Of course, we also include those who are otherwise able. But what we do is that we support critically. We support in our budget, and we support in every other space those who are seeking political leadership. And it doesn't make much of a difference whether that political leadership is on the national level or the international level. I sat with some young people recently, and they said that, the world is ruled by pale, male, stale leaders. And when we have that kind of leadership, there's a way that they think. There's a way that they have been ingrained. And questions of diversity only become issues that we want to champion when we realize that on the international level, and we are going there, we are trying to negotiate, we want terms, we want to trade, but the terms of trade are always skewed to the pale, male, and stale. And the diversity question only then becomes, we are Africans now, Africans unite, we have this new approach, I think we're calling it AFTA, the Africa Free Trade Area. And many countries in Africa have signed on to this with that promise that we are now going to be able to negotiate as a bloc.
I want to draw from a position you took when you are the CJ, the issue of the percentages in terms of representation, the basic minimum. And of course, it was legitimized officially by the Constitution. Now, when you are there as a CJ, and you have reminded me it was in 2012, when the AG brought this to the Supreme Court, and you are the president there, you debated this with your fellow judges. And finally, lo and behold, the entire, what do you call it, the bench, except its president, voted for delaying the implementation by saying this is a progressive issue. You are the only one who didn't.
I dissented on two issues. First issue was I didn't understand why women in parliament should be discriminated when women in the counties were not. And so I was able to basically say the Constitution does not allow that kind of discrimination. The other issue was to look at the history, which you have already mentioned, right? Women were not fighting for that token reform to be told to wait. The people who are denying that, use of it, it's a parliament. They're basically saying, women can have that in the counties, but not.
Then the judiciary just cemented that.
It's yeah.
No, actually, there has been some. I don't know whether it is progress, but okay. First of all, the gender question, the gender agenda in the Constitution of Kenya is actually, I think the best way to describe it is the great betrayal. It's actually the great betrayal. Since 2012, another request for an advisory opinion was sent to CJ Maraga. And he actually declared that Parliament as it was constituted then, that is in the fourth administration, was illegal because it did not comply with the two-thirds gender rule. Of course, it was all politicized. It was swept under the rug. And even up until we went into the elections for this new administration, it was not effected and no formula was brought together to come up with a way in which I think the women leaders in Parliament would come up with the number to make it an equal two-thirds. Even today, even in the bastion of political leadership, we don't have the two-thirds gender equality.
But I happened, although I'm your host, having participated in that process, and I can say the failure is not on the women, not suggesting viable formulas to create the instrument for implementation, because that is what was being said is lacking within that article, particular one article, to make it run the same way the counties do. We proposed many formulas and presented them to Parliament, but I never took them seriously. It is not for lack of formulas, because all you needed is an enabling clause. Because the provision is there, the principle is there.
It's a lack of political will.
It's a lack of political will. And
to be quite honest, if you look at the root cause, is that we're still dealing with the root cause is patriarchy, which is there. And it has to be identified as such, because if it's a third and they cannot give it, even in BBI, they were trying to bring it in, but where is the political will? Why can't they just?
No, actually, when you speak of patriarchy, and when we have these discussions, even on a general plane with just everyday Kenyans. The real thinking on the ground is that you're already too many women in leadership currently. It's so unfortunate. So patriarchy fights back.
I think.
If you look at it, if you look at that article the way it is phrased, this clause was not meant only to benefit women. And that's the part which has been missed. The no more than 2/3 gender rule, its implication was that neither of the two genders can have more than 60 or their percent.
Yeah.
Meaning, if we reach the stage of Rwanda, where women are now about 64% or thereabout, now it is the men to start evoking that rule. But the minute it was feminized and made an issue for women, that is when we lost direction. And I think, going to your patriarchy, patriarchy loves that. When an issue is feminized and they find all manner of loopholes to make sure it doesn't happen, what's your take? I think that there needs to be a new message coming out that this is not just about women. It is about the whole society.
It's equitable itself.
And the cracks of issues of equity and justice.
Just okay. I think the first thing I'd like to say, in churches, anywhere that there is leadership, in communities, in NGOs, even in companies, even the directors list on the stock exchange, they have achieved the 30%. It just seems that the place where it is the most elusive is specifically in Parliament.
What are the critical challenges? That the leadership, although this term now is becoming almost a cliche, the leaderships of this country need to create an ecosystem that empowers the youth and these hustlers, so that they can at least put some minimum amount of faith in the leadership, which they have now lost. How can they leverage their demographic advantage to foster, a better environment for themselves, right for transformational change?
Well, this is what I tell them. This is what I tell the youth. First, that social transformation in this country will come from the counties. We need to have a situation where even people who have degrees and whatever can actually run for positions as MCAs. Okay, and the reason is an MCA who is a progressive is pro-people. And invariably, is known by the people in the ward. Okay? And those people have, my experience is that, and this is from Kitui, where I come from, our MCA was a woman. She has been replaced now. But I remember whenever she got into, issues with Ngilo, of corruption and so forth, people will go to her mother and say, this should not be happening. So MCAs actually face the people's wrath if they don't, they don't deliver, if they don't conform. And that's where you're going to get MCAs who will become also very good governors. And it's a shortcut. Instead of being an MP, they can, if they do their work, they can just become governors. And here we're talking about county resources and how, they are used. So you can see a leadership emerging from, from counties, okay? And you can also envision a situation where the first political party that talks about social transformation is formed by MCAs who have the same vision that I was talking about, all right? I had this debate with Boniface Mwangi when he ran for MP. And I told him, you can't win because of the politics in Starehe is ethnicized, is the ODM and Jubilee. But go for the MCA, they will elect you, then you go to there. And and he would definitely have become a governor at some point. So my view is that it's the countryside that is going to give us, leaders, because they will be controlled, by the people. I see in Kitui, for example, the governor doesn't play games with the people. They stop him in town, and they say this road needs to be graded. Oh, it will be done tomorrow. No. Call the minister for transport to do it. And you see small rivers being bridged. You see roads being graded, and simply because of that proximity, the governors can't run away. Well, I hear the Somali ones do, but not the others, because the Constitution has given people that presence of actually walking to a governor, stopping him in town and saying this and the other. And that's where I see public participation. I see accountability, and where the people themselves begin to decide.
Taking power closer to the people.
Yeah, and the MCAs in Kitui, I know they're all young people. Yeah, the people in their, in their 20s. And so, if they want to change the counties, they will. But if they accept bribes, and then you have this benching, what is those trips they have?
For benchmarking.
They're benchmarking. So yeah, it's about benchmarking. I mean, Kitui has already spoiled. I thought it's just gossip, though, that they went somewhere and they have spent 100 million. Okay? People in this country should focus on actually the wastage. We focus on the corruption, that the wastage, the fact that Parliament does not meet in their boardrooms. They have to go to Mombasa. And going to Mombasa is about per diems. Okay? Going abroad is about per diem. So there's a lot of wastage that counties are challenged by, the people themselves.
But they are also doing the benchmarking.
Yes, they are doing that, but it gets them into trouble because that's why I think in the Constitution, devolution was, for me, a great, vision. Okay? Not only in terms of devolving political power, but the resources.
But what about devolving misgovernance, including corruption?
That one is, again, runs back to, to the issue of the leadership itself. Okay? But what I'm basically saying, that having, even in abstract terms, that the resources of this country have to be shared equitably between the national and the, it's important. And that's where the people come in, because they should be now asking what is happening with their development funds.
That's correct.
To the counties and so
they
forth.
are holding their leaders to account, so to say. Yeah. And Jacqueline, do you have something to add?
Yes, I have a few views in this respect. Of course, for me, I think more from the finance and economics point of view. So when we engage with the youth, I think there are two distinct categories, particularly when we're looking at resources. We have the youth that are young professionals. Probably they have qualified in a particular profession. They are starting out. So, of course, there's the advice that look for mentors. And mentors are more approachable today. I'm sure if they ask somebody like CJ or even you, Prof, you're ready to guide them on what has worked for you and what has also not worked. And then let them make a value decision on what works in the current age, because, of course, the dynamics may be different. So, of course, the thing and the issue for them to consider is, how will I be able to make an impact economically? So when it comes to choosing the political leaders, yes, choose those who are in the same predicament as you, but please choose people who are thinking about the wider population, who will be able to contribute at the table, not to make you the menu or the food, the dinner or the lunch, as it were, but to be able to progress your needs. So I come from Mombasa, and I'm also in the chamber there, and we engage with the county government on the finance bills. And we tend to find that nobody is interested in what is happening in the finance bill, unless it's parking, or I think usually it's really just parking. The parking rates have gone up. That is when you see people reacting. But there are so many development opportunities in there for the youth that can help. For instance, okay, we have the boda as a phenomenon. What would help the people who are doing the boda business? Would it be less taxes? Would it be subsidies? Nobody is asking those questions. If you look at different counties where they deal with, or predominantly agricultural counties, or even the nomadic counties with livestock, nobody is actually asking those questions. But the county is going to get on with its integrated plan. They're going to have their budget meetings. Nobody turns up. They will have a few people who sign off, and then eventually the bills will be passed. And this is also reflected on the national platform or the level. The same thing happens, and we are not involved. So we need to get the youth to be more economically savvy, understand the financial implications of what is happening, because when they come to deal with a taxman, they deal with them on an individual basis. But if we are to go and meet and say this is what we want to have in our budget, and we make enough noise, our politicians will listen to us. So there are very many complexities, and we haven't really paid a lot of attention. But for me, what I say to the youth is get involved. You don't need anybody's permission to get involved.
Yeah.
Just step in, make a difference in your space. And if one person speaks out, the next person listens and probably says the same thing. And eventually you have an economic movement which has a lasting impression on how our country is going to be managed and run. And hopefully for the benefit, actually not hopefully, we should demand that this is done for the benefit of Kenyans, for Kenyans.
Yeah.
And I think the youth have to shun ethnicity. That's something that is never discussed. That if they, progress the way I see them progressing, the marriages have ceased to be ethnic. Okay, so that's a great beginning. Okay.
But Judge, the youth, and I'll also speak for myself, I don't think of myself as my ethnicity until it comes time for the elections. When you have the messaging everywhere telling you you're a Kamba, or telling you that you're a Kikuyu, you're a Kalenjin, you're a Luo, and immediately they get into office, they forget that ethnicity, and even everybody becomes friends once again.
I think this problem we are dealing here of leadership, we have to be careful, just like the gender question, that we just don't look at numbers, but also what the quality of those numbers. Now here, with the side of the youth, they may be the future, but if they are also corrupted, their mindsets, then we are back to square one. So I think one of the messages we should, in addition to what you have said, it is not just get involved. It is getting involved in a manner where you are looking at yourself as a transformative leader who can take charge on behalf of the people and be held to account yourself, not just holding others to account.
They shouldn't have role models in the current leadership, whether it's you're a young pastor. You have to interpret the scriptures differently. Because it's about change. And if it's change is going to be, the religious leadership is very important. It's very, very, very important. And there are issues where the Pope, who is older, is very progressive.
That's right. More progressive.
More progressive. Yeah, so But I think all we can do, and I think we've done it, is to plug the root causes and why this leadership is required, not just at the level of politics, but at the level of families. Okay, because we can't have kind of leadership where the so-called head of the family, is a dictator.
Yeah, that's right.
When things are being discussed and,
I want to get into an example.
Yeah.
I taught governance, the same course, for about a year. That was just before COVID.
Yeah.
And we used to meet in person. And I'd have about maybe 50 to 60 participants. And we used to meet every Friday morning. And not the same people. You'd have a new group every week so that we could certify them. And once we started the class, I would ask everybody, do you go to church? Do you go to a mosque? 100% everybody would say yes. And then I'd ask them, you've just come from church or the mosque and you're driving home with your family, your kids in the back, husband and wife. And then you're stopped by a cop. And he tells you that you have some traffic infraction. And I ask them, what do you do? Almost 90% of them, of course now I will not name them or which community they come from, 90+% said, you just do what is convenient.
There you are. And indeed,
that is, you grease the pump.
Yeah, grease the pump. Yeah, we have to go for lunch. We are going for swimming. We're going for to see shosho or something like that.
Yes.
So it is really a serious problem.
It's a serious problem.
Serious
And
problem.
actually, the last one, and before we come to a close, I don't know whether you remember, this was 2016. And you were quoted by a Dutch newspaper on this issue of transformative leadership. I don't know whether you had been asked to talk about Kenya, but you focused on Kenya. And if you allow me to quote from there, he said, this is what you said.
Yeah.
Kenya is plagued by cartels, a fundamentally corrupt society and a criminal economy, like America in the 1920s. I am on the back of a tiger with the hope of not being devoured. And then as long as you conclude, as long as I have omitted some of the text, as long as the cartels are protected, there is nothing that can be done. These people go through a corrupt investigation system, a corrupt anti-corruption system, and a corrupt judiciary. We have become a criminal economy, unquote.
The issue of cartels, and I made sure that it was not just the national, but also the international ones. Okay, in terms of ruling, and I think I used the word bandit economy. I didn't say criminal.
Yes,
I said it's.
but you would agree. You are fundamentally saying.
Yeah.
And this one I put here myself, that we are trying to explain the difficulty of transforming the system from the inside, because you think they had confronted in a situation where many of those you are trying to convince have already been completely wired with the cartels.
Yeah. Yes, I was also saying how difficult it is for you to transform an institution when there is no political will to do it. Okay, the judiciary wouldn't have undertaken the reforms during my time if it wasn't for Kibaki, because Kibaki is the one who, after discussion, basically moved our budget from 3 billion to 17 billion.
For the judiciary.
Yes, and that's how.
Nobody is telling us that.
Yeah, I've talked about it. I've talked about it, and that was because we are able to convince him that access to justice will not happen when there are no high courts in the so-called far-flung areas, Lodwar and other places. And as a politician, he saw it. That is legacy. Yeah, because the politicians value their legacies. And so he increased it, and we built courts in Garissa, in places, and now there are high courts almost, every county, okay? I use that example to show that the leadership in a country has to be seamless. And the resources belong to the people. They don't belong to executive or parliament. So Kibaki, we praise him for that. So this notion that the executive and parliament control people's resources is something that the people have to basically say no. Yeah, the resources are not for the executive. Okay, and if you go with the data on how much money the executive has, it's compared to the police and others and so forth, it's immoral.
Yeah, it is.
It is immoral, and so I think the other thing we have to say about leadership really of a country is it has to be seamless, and we have a very good example of that. Because you mentioned Mandela, all right? Mm-hmm. When Mandela came into power, a lot of the judges were also members of the ANC. Mm-hmm. And they were able to basically focus on the national interests because they had the same vision. Mm-hmm. The problem is when you have institutions that don't have a collective vision about developing, the country. And that happens. Yes. Yeah, but when it's aligned, and that's why I was thinking that for practical reasons, we should try to align that at the county level. Yeah. We see where the alignment is, so that the counties now start all of them fighting for their resources that they're supposed to get from the center. And that's how the struggle has to continue, I think.
Do you have something to add, Jackie?
Okay, well, my views are very similar to CJ's. Mm-hmm. So I think the only thing I'd probably want to emphasize is that leadership begins with, I think, on an individual level. Mm-hmm. You must take leadership over yourself. Mm-hmm. And when you do, it's not as easy as it sounds. It's probably the most challenging endeavor that any human being can do. But when you do get control over yourself, then you're also able to figure out what works and what doesn't, what is right, what is wrong, what is just, what is fair, what is not. Mm-hmm. And when each and every one of us takes that step, then when we come together as a community, we're able to look out and think about the big questions, like what is the best solution for our country? Where does our national interest lie? And it doesn't really matter in which space, whether it's in the judiciary, whether it's in the private sector, whether it's amongst the politicians, because once you control yourself and you show leadership, you never know who is listening. You never know who is going to be able to take you up on what you're promising. When I listened to CJ talk about Kibaki, those are two individuals who had sat and one bought into the vision of the other, and they were able to make a huge difference, something that we are actually feeling up until today. I've attended court in Garissa online, and when you're listening to the call over, you'll hear the cases that are going on. Sometimes about goats and sheep. Sometimes about big contracts. Sometimes about huge crimes. But then each and every person in Garissa is able to access a court that is near them. I think in the previous setting, they probably have had to go to Meru, which is significant distance.
People in Moyale and Marsabit used to, yes, they used to go to Meru.
Yes, and traveling to Meru, you need to take an overnight truck.
Yes.
And it takes it costs a lot. So somebody will think, am I going to go and pursue my rights or not? And the cost would just be impossibly prohibitive. So one small step, CJ is talking about like it's one small step, but for somebody else, it is a huge step to bringing them just right next door to the
and the Kibaki gave mobile courts. Mobile courts where you basically you go to where the dispute is, so that they're...
So that, I think that philosophy is what has been adopted by now the current CJ, Martha Koome, with the social transformation and access to justice. If it is implemented well, we can expect that communities will be able to resolve their own disputes, so that whatever is making its way into the High Court, Court of Appeal, and the Supreme Court are matters that are of legal complexity that will have a huge impact. I think call it the general importance.
Would you want to also make your final remarks, because we are coming to that point where now we need to close?
Okay, wow. I've, first of all, really enjoyed this discussion. It really rings true to the values that I have. I'm not so sure I'm a transformative leader, and I think in that respect, I'd probably think of myself as a work in progress. I've had the benefit of watching, I think, the Young Turks, that's what you guys were called, the Young Turks and other leaders who have come along and also interacted with the youth. I prefer to be an optimist. I think there's still a lot that is right and good. So long as we have these discussions, we put our minds to what is positive. We also implement what we discuss, because, like I said, the threads that put us together can build a kilt that would enable our nation to grow from strength to strength. We have a lot to offer the world. We have probably the best qualified professionals in the world, and I say that without any fear of contradiction, and we export them in the diaspora. And I do believe that speaking with and working with Kenyans here and Kenyans abroad, we are able to achieve that dream of the Africa. We want Kenyans for Kenyans, Africa for Africans. I think I have so many thoughts in this area, but I will stop there.
For me, when I meet young people, artists, human rights, cartoonists, and so forth, what warms my heart is that I see myself in those young people. And I realize, well, even if we die, there are some people who continue. Because sometimes you start wondering, as a spirit, will you be coming back to see the same country?
An ancestor.
when you are an ancestor and so forth. So we've got to be optimistic, because I think if we are not, we can just give up. Yeah, we give up completely. And Jesus has delayed his coming, so...
Yes, indeed. I can't thank my two guests well enough. They've been here for quite a while and have really contributed ourselves to really beginning to address this very important topic, which cannot be finished in one session. We are going to continue this dialogue for as long as it takes. And we are going to learn from our viewers by the comments they make to what we have talked about here today. So we await those comments. But again, thank you, my two panelists.
Thank you.
Charge Chief Justice Dr. Willy Mutunga and Jackie, who is a very senior advocate here, and you can see she has a lot of knowledge on all matters within and outside the court. So I really feel privileged to have had you today. And thank you all very much on behalf of all of us at Mantle and Vaj, who are the ones who have made this happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.